Hi guys, I'm Tyler Cobb, and for this project I wanted to look at masculinity, and in specific I wanted to look at how we define masculinity here in America. So going into this project, I wanted to look at three different hypotheses and try to prove them. The first one was about the normative approach to masculinity and how it better defines masculinity using the social forces that surround it. The second hypothesis is that violence and masculinity are positively correlated. And my third and final one is that media portrayal of men and masculinity are positively correlated as well. So what is masculinity? When you hear the word masculine, what pops up in your head when you think of a man? Do you think of a man that's brave, strong, attractive, powerful? Do you think of a man that has a good job and can support his family? How do we define what's masculine? What do we look at in terms of describing masculinity? There are two concepts that describe two different views that I found that I feel both best describe what masculinity is, but they sit on different sides of the spectrum. The trait approach sits more on the biological traits and how those define a man. The second approach is the normative approach, and those are based on social norms and how those send us in different directions, looking at how masculinity is defined. The trait approach is based on innate traits that men must have in order to be considered masculine, and if men don't have these traits, then they aren't considered to be masculine. The more masculine traits that a man has, the more masculine they are under this approach. Because of this approach focuses really on the individual itself. The second approach, which I looked into, is the normative approach. The normative approach is based on social norms and how they help shape masculinity. There isn't one set of standards under this approach that men have to fit in order to be masculine. There are multiple different sets and different standards that help define masculinity under this approach. There are multiple views for this approach that are based in different cultures and different views on masculinity. They're based off things in different cultures such as the gender relations, the attitudes, and the beliefs of the people. The ideas of masculinity really change based on the time, group, and cultures, so there can't really just be one set specific way to describe masculinity. So after looking through the research on this topic, I found a lot of information that I thought helped prove my hypothesis correct, that the normative approach really does better define masculinity using the social factors that surround it. The whole idea behind the normative approach is that it really just defines masculinity through the social lens. So it does use the social factors that we put around the idea of masculinity depending on our culture. So I would go and say that this hypothesis was correct based on the information that I found and provided you guys. So the second part that I wanted to look into was violence and masculinity. I found that there was a commonality between men and violence and how they are associated with each other. I wanted to look into and see why this is, and apparently men are seen as more rugged, stronger, and aggressive beings than women or other gender countertypes or counterparts. Being aggressive is just more of a common trait for men in our society. In our society, we see men showing aggression in many different ways, from on the sports field, fights, in war. We see this in groups of men. They tend to show more masculinity if they're around other men. Men learn these masculine acts or aggressive acts and violence through things such as playing sports or being in a war scene or being in some kind of combat. And men tend to incorporate these things they learn into their everyday life. which then comes around and basically makes men more accepting to violence. And when men are more accepting to violence and likely to comply to the norms of masculinity, it means they are more accepting of this violence. So looking at the information that I found based on masculinity and violence, there was a lot that showed that it's just a basic norm for males to be more aggressive and violent. And it leads to this from different things, such as being in sports or war or other acts of aggression that they go through. And so to answer my hypothesis, to prove it correct, that men actually are, or that masculinity and violence are actually positively correlated, men are seen to be far more accepting and apt to displaying aggression and violence. So on to my last hypothesis, media and masculinity. The media impacts on people are really great. We are surrounded by media in our everyday lives, and we just really can't escape it. We have the media at our fingertips with our cell phones, tablets, laptops, TV, radio. It's really everywhere. And the way that the media impacts us is really great. We see the way that the media impacts women, creates women, a view of women that women must be skinny and fit these stereotypes that the media sets for them. This isn't just in women, though. This is also a huge thing for men as well. Men are portrayed in the media in ways that establish high standards for actual everyday men. When the media does this, the media portrays men as a much less real and more perfect and more predictable. And those are the words of Femiano and Nickerson. We really see masculinity in the media, and it produces stereotypes of masculinity that men are supposed to live up to. And these stereotypes can be really hurtful for men because some of these stereotypes can be very unattainable. So if men can't live up to these stereotypes that the media puts on us, it can affect men romantically in relationships. It can make women set high standards for men that men can't achieve, and it also affects us socially with other men too, because as men we see media and we reflect on how these men are, and we also reflect on how the other men in our lives are too, using the portrayals we see in the media. The media really sets these standards for men that say that men can't show emotion, and we must be independent, and we can't really lean on anybody. We have to be able to provide for ourselves. And this really causes issues for men because we can't always live up to these stereotypes. So continuing on with media and masculinity, during my research I found an article that was titled Media Internalization and Conformity to Traditional Masculine Norms in Relation to Body Image Image Concerns Among Men. And this article was by Jesus Ricciardelli and Friesen, and in the study they really looked at how the media affected men. They used two different scales to assess how individuals look at their bodies and their ideal versions of bodies that they see from the media. These two scales that they used were the internalization general subscale and the internalization subscale of socio-cultural attitudes towards appearance questionnaire. These two scales really just assessed how individuals looked at the media and how they compared these men in the media to their bodies, and how the media sets these ideal bodies and stereotypes and other things from men. This study was based off of college students, and they found that there was a 0.94 internal consistency of males that based their ideal bodies off the media. So from this we can see that there really is a huge impact that the media has on men when it comes to setting stereotypes and playing games essentially with our heads when it comes to how we should act and behave and look. So confirming my hypothesis number 3, when it comes down to this, the media really does have quite a big impact in how we define masculinity by setting all those stereotypes I was talking about for men. The evidence in the articles and the study that I found really does indeed affect or show how the media affects how we describe masculinity. So coming to one end, I want to see if you guys have a better understanding of masculinity. So going into our discussion, I want you to answer the 3 questions, and I'll post these 3 questions on our discussion board as well under my thread. 3 questions are, number 1, what are the 2 approaches that I've discussed during this? The second one was which one of the 2 approaches do you feel best describes masculinity? And then 3, I just want to know what your view is on how violence and the media influence how we define masculinity in America. And going on to my citations. And thank you all for looking onto my presentation for how we describe masculinity in America.